David Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for the Prepared Foods Network, welcoming you to another Prepared Foods video. Today it's on the power trend of protein. Consumers still seek protein as the #1 healthful ingredient for their daily diet. And there's no doubt that plant proteins have been hogging the limelight. But you know what else has been hogging the limelight? Pork and beef and poultry. In fact, even as consumption of plant-based foods has risen, so too has the consumption of meat. Consumers still prize animal proteins, and it's for the flavor, the texture, and the nutritional profile. That profile includes high protein bioavailability, plus vitamins and minerals that are hard to get from plant sources. So, to talk about the best ways to bring beef, pork, and poultry to the consumer table, we're sitting down today with Kang Kwan. He is the manager of, R&D manager of Armanino Foods. And Joey Jurgielewicz, he's the director of client services for the family-owned Joe Jurgielewicz and Son Limited. And Peter Gentile, he's the executive chef of one of the top-ranked steakhouses in the U.S., Steakhouse at Circus in Las Vegas. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi, David. Thank you for having us.
Glad to have you all. So, let's start with a brief insider's view as to what consumers are asking for in the way of their animal protein fix. What can each of you tell me about how you've seen consumer approaches toward beef, poultry, and pork shift in the past couple of years? Let's start with you, Chef Kang.
I don't know. I think it's probably because of COVID, but sort of before COVID, fat was a big topic. Plant protein was another big one. But I think after COVID, kind of help all of us focus on what's really important when we have to cook up for our own families and sort of juggle life in a way that hasn't been done before. So for me, it's more about sort of eating holistically and eating in a way that kind of meaningful eating is probably sort of a way to put it, right? So it's eating meaningful, knowing where the food comes from, and eating just enough so that you're satisfying both your stomach as well as your mind. So for me, that's kind of the happy spot. So it's just less of the mindless eating and less of eating this because people tell you to eat that way. So for me, that's the trend.
So how has that reflected itself in consumers' specific attitudes toward pork? Because I know that's changed in kind of a positive direction.
I think pork is sort of the stepchild in the sense of that it's sort of hard to market and it's kind of people's hard to cook. I think that pork is one of the most useful and versatile meat out there. I think the part of it is sort of the lack of knowledge and how to work with it, and people being comfortable with it, and that sort of over the generation, over successful years, basically shrinks down to fewer and fewer cuts, right? And if you look at it out there, the pork cuts that are out there is very much a reflective of what's out there for beef, because it's easier to convey what a center cut, beef cut, it looks like in pork. But pork is a lot more versatile, the ability to work with all the parts, and you do amazing things with it. So
using everything but the oink, right?
Yes, very much so. I'm sure if somebody can do something with the oink, they'll come up with it now by now.
Joey, your take on poultry is quite unique since your focus is on duck. And I know duck sales have enjoyed a very impressive jump in the recent years, with global sales of duck meat products on track to nearly double over the next 7 years, from 3 billion to 5 billion. Now, personally, duck is by far my favorite poultry, but what's going on with the average consumer and duck?
Those are absolutely amazing numbers. We love to hear that, and of course, for us, we can definitely confirm that duck consumption and people eating duck is going up every single year. It's we're very blessed on that end. I think Chef K mentioned COVID. I always hate talking about it, but at the same time, it it really hurt our business at the beginning because of food service. We were so food service driven that, of course, people didn't have access to duck. But at the same time, people became much more adventurous and open to trying new things. We were all stuck in our houses. We got bored of, say, cooking the same chicken fingers every single day or boiling spaghetti at the same time. So we wanted to expand our options at our home kitchens. You can look at a lot of meal delivery companies that grew or new ones that popped up, and they offered a lot of I like to say like alternative proteins, and duck was on those menus. So people learned how to experience it, how to use it, and really see how simple it is and comparable, but at the same time, how much naturally flavorful it was compared to a chicken breast or a piece of pork or a piece of beef.
Well, I hadn't thought of that with the meal delivery, but you're right. Meal delivery just shot up during COVID, of course, and it's nice to know that they were offering these alternatives. And I know that overall, poultry, chicken, turkey, duck, goose are enjoying a strong and steady growth. It's predicted to top $375 billion worldwide by the end of the decade. And I do know that most consumers are still eating a little more poultry than red meat on a monthly basis. Do you get any feedback from the consumer side as to a more open-minded attitude toward non-chicken, non-turkey poultry?
Yes, we get it's. I always say there's a lot of different types of duck eaters out there. So you get a lot of people that had a really bad experience with it, specifically duck. It was overcooked, it's too greasy, their grandmother forced them to eat it kind of thing at a holiday meal. Then you have people that never had it before. And I absolutely love those. I think they're wonderful because I love to challenge them to try something different. I mean, if I go out to eat with a group of people and there's duck on the menu, of course I'm going to order it, but at the same time I order it two or three more dishes of that so everyone can try it. And you get every time people have it, they're like, wow, I didn't realize how tasty this is, how healthy it is for you. On the health benefits, you can say, you can look at this for the whole protein board of people trying to eat less carbs. So of course they're trying to find what else can I eat. Duck is a great source of protein. 1 ounce of duck meat, there's 5 grams of protein. So it's absolutely, it's amazing. It's a great alternative for people's diets.
Wow, I think the other thing that helps, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there are chefs out there who have become like more interested in serving duck and have gotten away from the duck à l'orange, which has been most Americans' introduction, and I guess most French introduction to duck, and it's not a modern enough flavor. But as people are expanding, as chefs are expanding the way they present duck, I'm guessing that's kind of helping boost sales as well.
Definitely. And I think there's also a huge trend too with people realizing the natural flavor in meat, that you don't really have to do a lot to it. For example, on a duck breast, it's a little bit of salt, and if you want to put some pepper on it, great. But you can have a very easy meal cooked in 18 minutes at home with minimal work and have it's a hero maker. The duck à l'orange, it's because a lot of that, I mean, I hope I don't offend any chef that still has it. I feel that they don't know how to cook, so they're trying to mask it with a sauce. And that's it. If I want to go eat orange or something, I just go eat some oranges. I don't want it all smothered over my piece of meat or the duck there.
That's right. Often, I was a chef back in the 70s and 80s, got out in 1990. And, even back then, it was like, this is just way too sweet. Let's tone it down. And
it was less education on how to cook it. People didn't realize that you don't have to just cook a whole duck. You can break it down. You can have a delicious duck leg slow roast in your oven, or a duck breast, or even used away. Every part can be used.
You're making me hungry. And Pete's here, and he's been having some technical difficulties.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you,
Good.
Chef. Still no picture, but that's okay because we know you've got good information and you'll paint a picture. So tell us about beef. What's happening with beef among consumers these days?
Well, I think, you and I had a great chat while you were there. what we've noticed, and again, I've eaten all over Las Vegas and many different steakhouses. What I think a lot of people are reverting back to, a chef's, I think, overcomplicated steak and sauces and slicing it into little pieces and everything. I think people are going more back to the wholesome cut, wanting that beautiful piece of meat on their plate. And I think that's why our steakhouse is thriving, is because it's just an old school setting and it's not overly complicated. I think people are going back to uncomplicated, if that makes sense. Because sometimes us chefs take things too far and we want to, it's like like a picture. We want to make it beautiful, but sometimes it may not be the best thing to eat. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, we went through the whole molecular cuisine craze that really did
Yep. Spherification and little,
yeah.
this and that on top of meat and a lot of microgreens and swooshes and all that other stuff. But when you put a beautiful cut of meat and you spend the time to cook it properly, I think people are really kind of leaning back towards that. Not to say that, again, I think, food is, awesome and beautiful. I love to do things like that. But when it comes to trends and things like that right now, I think people are, they're looking for a value. That's another thing too. And when you put a nice piece of full meat on a plate, and I think people are taking that. I think that's where the trend is going a little bit more. And, again, value. And that's the thing I think the most of it. But again, I just think it's going a little bit backwards. And I think the culinary world has always done that. If you notice, it kind of goes in one direction and then it'll kind of tear back to the other one, kind of like what Joey said about, duck à l'orange. I think it masks the beautiful piece of duck as well. You could do the same thing with steak. Too much sauce, too much seasoning. And again, I just think you need to make the steak the star. That would be the last thing I'd say on that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I have noticed that at least in retail food service, I have seen a lot less use of sauces with beef, even when it's not whole cuts than there used to be. And that kind of segues into our next section here, which is how we can creatively help consumers enjoy more animal protein-based products in the prepared foods segment, where we're, cranking out entrees, appetizers, sides using animal protein that are for, in-store retail or in-store delis and the like. So since we got you going, Pete, let's hear, what your impression is on how product makers can make good use of beef.
I think one of the most important thing to meet and exceed, our guests' expectations when they come to the restaurant is quality, right? And making sure that what we're putting on the plate is what they want. It's paramount that we have a very good relationship with our purveyor, our meat vendor. Him and I are on a first name basis, and we communicate often about, products and stuff like that. So having a good relationship with your supplier when you don't actually process your meat on property. I have full range to be able to go to his plant and walk the plant and see all my stuff from the half all the way to my restaurant. So it's very important that we have those things with the suppliers and the relationships that we have. Very, very important, and, for our part, we prepare sticks, to properly prepare a steak. I think the key, is consistency and not overcomplicating. As I said before, the steak is actually the star, where most chefs in our industry use gas grill. We use mesquite charcoal, which, I think it imparts an unmatched flavor in the steak. And the staff that I have working for me, I think the least senior one is 27 years. So having that consistency with people that care about what they're doing, I think is one of the paramount things of how we do things here. And I think it's very important. Each steak we prepare, they prepare. I want them to prepare it as if they were doing it for themselves or their family. And I think that type of care basically translates to what they put on the plate for the guests. You know, when we have 500 to 1,000 that we're turning out on a daily basis, I think it's important for them to have that type of dedication. When it comes to meat, I think sometimes what people do is they take that meat and they basically grab it from the refrigerator and they throw it on the grill. And that to me is one of the biggest sins you can do. You need to take the steak out, let it rest for at least 5 minutes to get, or more, to get it more to room temperature, because in that way it cooks much more evenly. And at the end result will give you a much better product. You know, and a good cut of beef, salt, pepper. I know we've talked about that a little bit here, but just salt and pepper, and, you know, adding a little bit of olive oil for the seasoning. And you know, what that'll do is give you those fancy grill marks to finish it. You know, when you're spend your time on all of that and you cook your meat, I think, I think we've all kind of been there, where you take the meat off the grill, you slice in nice pieces, and all of a sudden it's in a puddle. I think that the main reason why is that meat needs to sit and rest once it's done cooking, so that all the juices can redistribute within the meat, and allow that to, you know, when you cut into it, get all the juice and the goodness of the steak is still in there. So I think it's really important at the end of it to let that steak sit and rest.
But it's also a very good tip for, you know, the product manufacturers. You know, when you're running a production line and you've got, you know, hundreds of pieces of, you know, meat that you have to make and prepare and, you know, package, you know, whether it's for, you know, frozen or, you know, even canned, whatever, it can sound, you know, like an extra hurdle to jump through by letting that meat rest. But I agree. If even if you're running a production line, if you can find some way to allow those few minutes for that meat to sit and rest after it's cooked before further processing into a prepared item, then you will preserve a nice, you know, juicy piece of meat. So you're definitely,
yeah, I don't care what type of meat you're cooking either, to your point.
So I've had your steaks, man. They definitely are, pardon the pun, a cut above.
And we try really hard. And thank you.
And like I said, all these are all techniques that can be applied in batch processing. That inspires me to throw another question at each of you, and it'll be a simple one. Again, thinking of the batch, you know, the production, the product manufacturer, product developer for CPG companies, or, you know, again, commissaries, delis, food service, but mostly for, you know, the prepared food industry. What would you say are the best sources, cuts, and prep techniques? And, you know, and then throw in any ancillary ingredients that can help ensure success for the product manufacturer to cover all the bases. So let's go to you, Joey. You know, you mentioned that whole duck, you know, doesn't have to be a whole duck. So what would you say would be the best cuts? I know what you say the best sources are, because that would be your duck farm. And then, but what would be the best cuts and preparation techniques, and any ancillary ingredients?
I think a common theme I've heard from the two other speakers, guest here, is simpler the better. So I always say that every part, especially of the duck, has a use to it, and can be extremely tasty. If we want to go to specifics, you can go to the two most popular cuts other than whole ducks is duck breast, duck legs. Is again simplicity. A duck leg only needs a little bit of salt and pepper. You can throw it in a casserole dish for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, low heat, 300 degrees max, and you're going to have an absolute delicious piece of meat that will fall off the bone. Duck breast, exact same way. Just salt, pepper, render skin side down. A pro tip I always say is start in a cold pan. I hate when someone says pan-seared duck breast. It just is throw the duck breast, let it heat with the pan so you render it perfectly. We were talking about fats earlier. I mean, if you have the perfect meat to fat ratio, which we feel we have in our duck, you get that amazing flavor that just naturally goes back to the meat. Let it rest, like Chef said. You want to keep all those juices right in that piece, in that cut of duck. And again, 18 minutes and you are you're going to look like you're John George or Daniel Boulud at your home kitchen.
Oh, it's interesting because it's almost the start it in a cold pan is almost counterintuitive to what we usually hear.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, a little bit different than the steaks. Yeah, no, it's everybody wants that nice crispy rendered skin. You can tell if a chef or even if you're getting a say a pre-cooked duck item, if they didn't render it properly. It's because they threw it in a hot pan, that skin tightened up and it can't go anywhere. So it's gonna stay there.
So, Chef Peter, is it the same for beef? Do you want to start? I know you can't start on a cold grill, but if you're, preparing in, beef in batch format in, say a large griddle, what would you recommend? Start cold, start hot?
With meat like I do, is you start it off kind of hot, right? With the seasoning, get that nice little char on it. You can do the reverse to Joey's point. Like when you're doing, you can start out cold and get it all cooked and then do that sear at the end. And then, you know what I mean? You can also do that. But like when you're at home, is really at the home grill, even if you're using charcoals, it is utilizing it into a section to where you have a hot part and then you have your other part that's not as hot where the meat can finish. So you'd start out a little bit hot with the salt and pepper. And again, my favorite cut is a ribeye because of the fat to meat ratio, and that fat kind of renders out and really, I think, imparts some of the biggest flavor. Start it out hot, make it, and then kind of let it finish and cook it to the temperature you like. Again, I think, ribeye, start hot, get it going really good. Put your good, seal your meat on each side so that the juices stay in. Finish it on a less hot part of the grill, and then again, when it's done, let it rest.
Yeah, something I've heard from both you, Peter, and Joey is about the fat and how important it is. Chef Kang, we've mentioned a little throughout about how fear of fat, or at least we've indicated how fear of fat among consumers, thank God, has diminished greatly. I think there's an understanding of the importance of fat, not just in food preparation, but in the diet. That it's not the demon we've been led to believe. So how is that going for pork fat? And then again, what are the what would you recommend as the best cuts for mass production of a product, prepared foods? What would you recommend, both cut and technique?
For me, I'm all about it off cuts. Center of the plate cuts are beautiful, and you can't go wrong with them, right? But as a chef and as a product developer, it's our knowledge base that's really that's where we shine. The ability to use a shoulder, the ability to use a shank, the ability to use the cuts that nobody wants to use and do something interesting with it, right? And one of my favorite cuts of me is pork shoulder. So much you can do with it. It's so versatile, and and you can. One of my favorite way to cook is overnight. And I used to sear it, and then put it on a bed of mirepoix and put it in a Le Creuset and leave it in the fridge. And when I'm about to go to bed at night, turn my oven, to 250 degrees, stick that pot in the oven, and wake up in the morning and to interesting smell. If nothing else, I'll tell you what, I get funny dreams because of the smell. For the longest time, I dream of like sausage McMuffin and stuff like that. But you get the most amazing happy smell in the morning. You do the low cooking, right? And that cooking technique could be used for pork. You could be used on lamb. Like lamb neck is another one, a great one. Like we don't eat as much lamb as we should. I think it's delicious.
I agree.
For me, lamb is like the duck of the poultry world, right? Lamb is incredibly versatile, but for us it's like, oh, lamb, New Zealand lamb, and can't find lamb. It's a special occasion thing. But some of the most interesting cut, lamb shoulders and lamb necks. So, anyways.
Lamb and goat, my Middle Eastern heritage just goes nuts for lamb or goat. And one of the very best meals I have ever had in my life, several times is at a restaurant on the off one of the main highways in Israel, in one of the Arab cities, that they do a stuffed lamb neck that is just to die for. I got to tell you, that lamb neck at El Babur in Al Fahim, Israel, is just the best. And I'm with you there, but I think what is key to what you've said, and it's indirectly answered my question about the fat when it comes to pork, is that low and slow cooking. Because what happens, it's slowly simmering in its own fat, absorbing all those juices. And these are techniques that if product makers can also get over fear of using the natural fats in process, could take advantage of. And that low and slow cooking method, where you get that much richer flavor, I can see how that'd be a great value in product creation. So this has been great, guys. I know each one of you could just write volumes on these topics. I wish we had the time. Our time is up. I would love to have you guys back individually sometime if you're willing, so for now, thanks again so much for the prime cuts of techniques on your topics. I want to thank our audience for joining us. You'll find a number of articles, podcasts, videos, other source material on animal protein products and on all sorts of ingredients products right here at preparedfoods.com. Again, I'm David Fetter, Executive Editor Technical for Prepared Foods Network, with Chef Kang. He's the R&D Manager at Armanino Foods. Joseph goes by Joey Jurgielewicz. He's Director of Client Services for the family-owned Joe Jurgielewicz and Sons Duck Farm. And Peter Gentile, Executive Chef of the Steakhouse at Circus Las Vegas. I hope you'll join us next time for more food and beverage industry news and information. Thanks for tuning in.